If you've got Psalm 133 open there, it'd be great. We've just come off the back of our Term 1 sermon series looking at Genesis 1 to 11, and one of the themes of that series was God's judgment on sin. So whenever mankind sins in Genesis 1 to 11, God pronounces judgment on them, and that judgment is scattering them. He scatters people. So when Adam and Eve take the forbidden fruit, God judges them by scattering them away from him. He kicks them out of the garden. When Cain kills Abel, God judges him by scattering even further away to make him a restless wanderer. When the people of Noah's day sin, God scatters them in the flood. And then when the people of Babel gather together in communal apostasy, God judges them by scattering them through confusing their languages. All right? So in the Bible, God judges people by scattering them. So in C.S. Lewis's book, The Great Divorce, it's an awesome book, he describes hell as a bleak city called Greytown. And in Greytown, it rains every day, including indoors, all right? And upon arrival, the narrator comes across a few people here and there who basically do nothing but complain. And the whole point of Greytown is that people get so sick of others that they move further and further away out into the darkness, away from everyone else. That's hell, according to that book. Now, why is it that scattering is a form of judgment, of punishment? Well, it's because it goes directly against our design as humans. Right? So we learned back in February that being made in the image of God means being made for relationships. So just like the Father, the Son, and the Spirit are in perfect, other person-centered, loving relationships with each other, so too are humans built for relationships. But it's not just one-on-one relationships we're made for. We're made for unity, sort of communal unity. Let me explain. So if you were to ask any Jew today to quote for you Deuteronomy 6 verse 4, 99 out of 100 of them would be able to say straight away, quote, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. All right? It's a little chant that Jews are taught from a very young age, and when translated, it means, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Right? It's not just that the Father, the Son, and the Spirit are in one-on-one relationships with each other. There is a unity to the Trinity. They are three persons in one. And so being made in the image of God means being made for unity, communal unity. And this is why scattering is a curse. Right? It goes against our design. Whereas gathering, like we're doing this morning, is a blessing. That's how we live according to our design. And this is what Psalm 133, this is our passage for today, that's what it's talking about. It's talking about the blessing that is God's people being united. So let me read verse 1. How good and pleasant it is when God's people live together in unity. So what we're looking at today is how we as Christians can enjoy the good and pleasant blessing that is church unity. I've got 4 points. You can see that on your inside of your news sheet. They're very simple points. We're going to begin by saying that unity is attractive. That's what verses 1 and 2 are talking about. Unity is attractive. Verse 3 then tells us why unity is attractive. That's point 2. All right. Point 3 is looking at how exactly this unity is achieved before we wrap up with our application, which is the path to that unity, that blessing. But our goal for today, look, it's twofold. We're going to look at how we as Christians can, A, live according to our design, right? Experience that same unity God experiences, and B, how to enjoy the enormous blessing that is church unity. If that sounds attractive to you, then let's dive in and look at the beauty of church unity. And our passage begins in verse 0. Believe it or not. If you're ever reading a psalm, and I'm very glad that John did this, I didn't even cue him up for it, he did the exact right thing, you always start with the heading. So even though our English versions make it look like the psalm headings are kind of like the NIV section headings that aren't actually part of the Bible, that's not the case with the psalms. In the Hebrew, the headings are actually part of verse 1. And our heading for Psalm 133 says, a song of ascents. A song of ascents. Now, Jordan introduced us to the songs of ascent last week. They in the sermon last week. They're the psalms that the whole nation of Israel would sing when they were walking up to Jerusalem, walking up to the temple. So the Old Testament Israelites were commanded by God to go to Jerusalem 3 times a year. They were commanded basically to have 3 weeks of annual leave a year, or even longer if you had to travel for long distances, all right? And those holidays, commanded holidays, were religious festivals. They were celebrations, okay? And so what you would do is you would walk to Jerusalem. There's no planes, trains, or automobiles back then. You would walk to Jerusalem, usually in groups. And as those groups started to come together as you were getting closer to Jerusalem, they would start singing. And they would sing the songs of ascent. And we can almost picture it, can't we? The beauty of hearing that music. It actually reminds me of the old men's conventions from about 10 years ago. We went to that big old shed, but this is before they put the insulation in there. And when you got 3,000 men pounding out those old hymns, just reverberating in the shed, it was a spectacle. It was awesome. Right, and that's what we got here. These huge crowds of God's people singing together. And these are the words they're singing. How good and pleasant it is when God's people live together in unity. And the psalmist then gives us a picture of how good it is. Verse 2, it's like precious oil poured on the head, running down on the beard, running down on Aaron's beard, down on the collar of his robe. Now, this verse sounds a little weird to you and me, doesn't it? Like, what's it talking about there? Well, the reason it's weird is because we're quite removed from ancient Israel. So Aaron here refers to the high priest. The actual Aaron, the real life Aaron, had long since died back in Moses' day, but David is using poetic license here to refer to the high priest. And the thing we need to understand about the high priest is he was the celebrity of the day, alongside the king. But the high priest was the one, like he was famous, but he was the one who interceded for you with God during those religious festivals. All right. And so what would happen was he would take a ritual bath, make sure he was completely clean. Then he would put on his high priestly robes. These were the most beautiful and elaborate robes in all of Israel. And then he would anoint himself with oil. And the oil in the old days was sort of a mixture between hair product and cologne. All right. So the high priest looked and smelled the absolute best he could look or smell for these religious festivals. So a modern day equivalent of this would be the red carpet at the Oscars, or at least back when the Oscars were popular. All right, you have the most beautiful and famous celebrities on the planet getting all dolled up in the most expensive outfits on the planet. They just step straight out of a beautician to look and smell their best, and they're going to the #1 calendar event of the year. Okay, what the psalmist is trying to say here is church unity is the most beautiful and glamorous event you can get on the calendar. Compare that to the opposite. About 5 years ago now, around 24 people left our church in the space of about 6 months. They weren't happy with our church, in particular me. Now, for those who were here back then, how did that make you feel? Did it feel like the red carpet at the Oscars? I was actually speaking to someone about a year ago about this, and they confessed to me that they believed that one particular, I think I might have told you this before, they believed that one particular couple left because of them. And I had to say to this person, actually, no, that particular couple came to see me specifically to tell me they were leaving because of me. Now, I'm not saying this to try and get sympathy, all right? I'm just trying to explain that church disunity makes everyone feel terrible. Right? It has taken us several years to recover. So let me ask you this. It's a rhetorical question, right? What would you rather? Would you rather God's people living in unity? Or would you rather God's people intolerant, fractured, and falling apart? Well, the psalmist goes on to explain in verse 3 exactly why church unity is so attractive. So let me read it. It is as if the dew of Hermon were falling on Mount Zion, for there the Lord bestows his blessing, even life forevermore. Now again, we Aussies are a little removed from this, but Mount Hermon is a huge mountain, part of a huge mountain range right at the northernmost part of ancient Israel. It's actually on the border of modern-day Lebanon and Syria, okay? Zion is another name for Jerusalem, and Jerusalem was located towards the south of the Promised Land. So what the psalmist is saying here is, imagine if some of that fresh, snow-capped dew from all the way up on Mount Hermon, imagine that was falling on stinking hot Jerusalem during one of our summer festivals. Now, not only would it be beautiful and refreshing, it would be completely out of place. Like, how do you get fresh dew falling on you from a mountain range that is over a week's walk in the distance? As one commentator put it, that would be a miracle. And that's what he's talking about here. He's saying that church unity is a miracle. Okay, we have here people of different ages, different genders, different races, different classes, different political and social persuasions, all coming together for a common purpose, to worship our God. So friends, please understand that our little church here at Earlwood Anglican is a modern day miracle. Right, just look around at the people here today. I don't mind if you take your eyes off me for a second. All right? How many of these people here would you be friends with if it weren't for our church? Very few, I would guess. And this is why church is so attractive. Right? Can you think of anywhere else in our society where the racial barriers, the gender barriers, the class barriers, the political barriers that divide the rest of humanity, they're just missing? Like, I can't think of anywhere else you would see this kind of unity across all social divides. You might get one or two here or there, right? But one of the things that makes the Christian church so attractive, one of the things that will make outsiders look at us and think, man, these people have something that no one else has, is that in a world where social divides are getting wider and wider, our church pulls down those divides. All right? They will know we are Christians by our love. So let me ask you again, what would you rather? To experience the modern miracle of people from all corners of society living together in unity? Or be like the rest of Western society? Right? Intolerant, fractured, and falling apart. Now, if you would prefer unity, the next question is, how is this unity achieved? Well, to see this, we need to go back to verse 0, where we see that this Song of Ascents is of David. It was actually King David who made Jerusalem the place where all of Israel would gather 3 times a year. And we think he wrote this psalm early in his reign to commemorate those wonderful gatherings. Yet as Derek Kidner points out in his commentary on this psalm, David was not able to keep this unity. Because of his sin with Bathsheba, God vowed that the sword would never leave David's household. And on one such occasion, his son Absalom usurped his throne. And Absalom got the majority of Israel on side with him. And it culminated in a civil war. Doesn't get much more fractured than that, does it? And so what it shows is, though David's saying about the beauty of church unity, he wasn't able to achieve it. We need another king for that. And this brings us to our second reading for today. So we're finished in Psalm 133. If you want to flick over to Philippians chapter 2, so it's page 1824. 1824, we're just going to spend a bit of time in this passage. We actually looked at this passage 2 weeks ago on Good Friday. It's a great passage that talks about Jesus' humility unto death. And the theme of this passage is seen in verse 2. So we've got Philippians 2, verse 2. Then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and of one mind. All right, so what Paul wants, what will make his joy complete, is church unity. It actually comes up, that theme actually comes up in almost all of Paul's letters. Apart from the truth of the gospel, church unity is the most important thing to Paul. And as we saw on Good Friday, the way we achieve this church unity, okay, this blessing, is through humble service. So have a look at verse 3. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, rather in humility value others above yourself, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of the others. So if we want to enjoy the good and pleasant blessing that is God's people living together in unity, it is found in considering, valuing, treating others as of greater importance than us. But here's the million-dollar question for today. What is our motivation? What is our fuel for this humble service? Well, look, on Good Friday, for those who were here, you'll remember I said it's what Jesus has done for us. Right? When we see Jesus giving up all his power and humbling himself to a willing death, all right, how can we not want to return that favour? Now, that's your typical stop standard Good Friday sermon, all right? But one of our regulars came and talked to me over morning tea on Good Friday. Nick is actually given me permission to use his name this morning, okay? And now Nick was very complimentary. He said, great sermon, thank you, Brennan. Exactly what we want to hear on Good Friday. But he asked me, wouldn't verse 1 have been a good motivation as well? And I said, what do you mean? How so? And he said, well, verse 1 is what fills our heart. So read it with me. Therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any common sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete. So the principle goes like this, all right? Every single human being on the planet wants to be loved and accepted. That's what we're all looking for. That's why we have those little like buttons on social media. People want to feel loved and accepted, okay? But here's the thing. Those who are not feeling loved and accepted in their life, they will start to get desperate. That's how we're made. And these kinds of people, they'll come to church and they'll say, look, this is what I like, so I would like you, I'm demanding that you do everything my way. Now compare that to those who already feel really loved and accepted. Right? They, on the other hand, don't need to make such demands. These are the people that come to church and they say, look, I don't mind what songs we do. I don't mind how long the prayers go for. I don't mind what we have for morning tea. I'm just really happy to be here. And Nick said to me, the way we get our tank filled with love and acceptance so that we're not demanding that everyone else love us is by being encouraged that you are part of Christ's family now. Like, how amazing that he adopted the likes of you and me. That's how accepted we are. And it's by being comforted that the God of the universe would rather give up his son than lose you. That's how loved you are. And Nick said, look, it's experiencing God's love. Now, he doesn't mean in a Pentecostal second blessing kind of way. It is experiencing, simply delighting in the depths of God's love for us are seen in Christ. That's what fills our tank so that we don't have to demand that others love and serve us. We actually have the fuel to love and serve others. And I said to Nick, listen, Nick, that's what I've been preaching here for 10 years now. And you're the first person who's been able to repeat it back to me. And he said, yeah, I've only just started to get it in the last couple of weeks. Now, truth be told, Nick is actually the second person to understand this. The first is Neil, sitting here today as well. And so, look, friends, if you don't understand my point here, if you don't understand what I'm saying, if you don't understand how church unity is achieved through us experiencing and delighting in the depths of God's love for us, as found in the Bible, then can I encourage you, go and chat to Nick or Neil this morning and ask them how they are getting on with this. It is the key to living the Christian life. Final question we need to ask is that when our tank is filled, what is the path? What are the specifics, the dynamics of how the path we need to tread to achieve this church unity? Now, can I begin by saying we are already doing really well here at Elwood Anglican? All right? Most people I speak to these days really love being here. They love our church community. So please be encouraged in that. It's a great place to be. All right? And it's a beautiful and attractive place to invite others along to. But let's get practical as we close. So, like I said on Good Friday, humble service doesn't mean believing that other people are better than us. It means considering, valuing, treating others as of greater importance than us. And so there is bound to be people here who might annoy you. Right? We're a pretty diverse bunch. It's inevitable in a group this size. So what do? When that happens, when someone says something or does something that kind of grates with us, our first instinct should not be that I need everything to be just the way I want it. Right? Jesus certainly doesn't get everything he wants with us, does he? I sin every day, you sin every day. So what do? We need to keep the peace by loving and encouraging and supporting that person or those people that tend to grate on us. It's by considering them as of greater importance than us. That's the first thing we can do. The second thing we can do is we can foster a spirit of service in our church. Right? One of the quickest ways to sink a church is to treat it like a cruise ship. What do I mean by that? On a cruise ship, there are some people who work and some people who laze around. And that's the point of a cruise ship. But that's not what a church is. A church is a battleship where everyone has their post. Everyone has their job. Right? Church unity comes from everyone being in this together. So what does this look like? Well, it starts with our finances. Right? You cannot have church unity without a church. Can you? And we need money to keep this place going. So are you giving generously to this little miracle called Elwood Anglican? Second, it means giving of our time and energy to keep this place nice and neat and tidy. Right? How attractive do you think this place would be if the lawns and gardens turned into a jungle, or if the carpets and toilets were filthy? Right? Are you giving of your time and energy to keep this place looking attractive so that others will think, these people enjoy being here? The next, it means serving your brothers and sisters in some form of ministry. How can you use the gifts and the skills and the passions that God has given you to love and care for your fellow brothers and sisters here? And fourthly and finally, it means caring for others in practical ways. What do people need? Do people need anything that we can give them? Now, it sounds like a lot of work. Guess what? It is. I'm not going to lie to you. But that's what it takes to enjoy the good and pleasant blessing that is God's people living together in unity. Now, if you would rather the opposite, if you would rather join the pandemic of loneliness that is currently gripping Western society, then by all means, ignore Psalm 133 and ignore Paul's teaching in Philippians 2. But the reason Western society is feeling a little like C.S. Lewis's Greytown is because of a rise in narcissism where everyone demands that the others serve them. But if we want to live according to our design and enjoy how good and pleasant it is when God's people live together in unity, then may the comfort of God's love for you overflow into humble service of others.